Hi, we're live. Perfect. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Women's Well. Our Substack Live's on Tuesday. So every week on Tuesday, Dr. Amy and I go live to talk about a topic in the convergence where matrescence or motherhood is meeting perimenopause and menopause. And before we get into today's topic, let us just introduce ourselves. A little reminder. I am Erica. I am one half of Women's Well. I'm the physician assistant. I am a mama who is, and I also do a lot of other things. I have a lot of traditional or background in ancient traditions such as yoga therapy, meditation, shamanism, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also a mama to 3 kiddos, 26, 5, just recently turned 5. We have started kindergarten this week, and a 3.5-year-old. And I'm 48 years old. I am in early perimenopause, and really in the thick of things. And Dr. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Amy. I am in late perimenopause, mothering a teenager. Just started high school.
Oh, exciting.
So new beginnings as well. And I live in Oregon and happy to be here.
Yay. So we built Women's Well because what we found in our lives, not only as people living through the experience, but as clinicians ourselves, that there is a really big gap in women's support for moms that are in their older decades, if you will, in terms of childbearing. So late 30s, 40s, 50s, and we're having children in that age. And we're finding ourselves crossing a dual rites of passage. One is being through motherhood and one is through perimenopause, menopause. And so Dr. Amy and I are really here to help support moms just like ourselves that are having tiny humans, toddlers, and teenagers in the middle of all this stuff. I think, do you, Dr. Amy, want to just really quick before we get into what tonight's format is, do you want to just talk about what our definition of matrescence and perimenopause is when we're talking about this?
Sure. We view matrescence as the entire motherhood from pregnancy until your child reaches adulthood. And it's really this reorganization of the woman and including not just body and mind, but our identity and where we fit in the world. And then perimenopause, really midlife as returning home to ourselves, the truest form of ourselves, through often surrendering and letting go of that doesn't serve. And so the convergence is for us mamas that had children later in life. Convergence is active mothering while going through those changes of perimenopause.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a lot of language out there for what we're talking about. So we're really hoping to open up that space. And so if any of this resonates, make sure you send us a message, drop it below when you're watching the replay, and let us know what else it is you would love us to talk about or look at for you. So tonight, friends, we are going to talk about rage. Good old rage. It's real. It happens in motherhood and it happens in perimenopause and menopause. And I think it is something that we sort of quietly hide it in the background and pretend like it's not happening to all of us and have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around it. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of factors that play into that. And so tonight I'm going to be asking Dr. Amy to share her insights, her experience, and some of her clinical wisdom around this particular topic. So the first thing that I want to ask you, Dr. Amy, is from a psychological perspective, how would you describe rage?
Well, rage sits on the continuum from frustration and irritation and ordinary anger into the extreme end of that. And what really distinguishes it from anger is that it's not the trigger or the beginning, it's the really the loss of the usual pause between feeling and acting. And so it's really the boiling point.
Totally the boiling point.
And it often has an underlying primary emotion so that it is a secondary emotion.
So, can you say more about that sort of secondary emotion that you're talking about? Because I don't think that that's a common language a lot of people hear, but it's important to understand.
Sure. What I mean by rage as a secondary emotion is that it's usually on top of some other emotion, sitting on top of it, something that feels more vulnerable for us, like fear or sadness, grief or shame, helplessness, and exhaustion. And anger, with rage being at the extreme end of that, is different than those underlying emotions, the underlying emotions which are vulnerable might make us feel powerless and sort of stuck, and might make us feel like we need to collapse. Whereas rage can mobilize us and make us feel our power, which is why it can feel almost like a relief in the moment of mom rage. And I would just say that my own lived experience, I wrote it out today on Substack, on our Substack post.
Yeah.
And my most recent experience with extreme mom rage is written about, where my son would not get off his phone, would not stop playing video games, and we were exhausted from not sleeping well the night before, had to get ready to have a 6-hour drive with our family, and I just exploded at him.
It's kind of easier than we think to have happen, to be honest.
Yeah, I think actually it's really common, and so we're bringing it to talk about, so that everybody can talk about it. Because
and I wrote about it. I'm going to have a Substack on Friday for the folks that are interested about my experience, because this will be my second round of experiencing mom rage, and in the middle of this perimenopause, and there's like a specific flavor to it. I feel it's a little bit different. So there's just a lot here. And I will say, as I wrote about it this week, I felt a lot more relief about being able to write about it and talk about it and feeling seen and identified, and not feeling like I was alone on an island. I think that's what's
totally
so important.
Absolutely normal. Happens to everybody, and has some important, it's actually important for us as humans to be able at times to express it when needed.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to say, you kind of talked about it a little bit. I don't know if you want to expand on it, about the difference between rage and primary emotions, or if you want to go into, which we will at some point. I just don't know if we're going to add a little bit more, or if you want to go into the thought around rage and fight or flight, because there's a really...
Well, I will say that when you have the primary emotion like sadness or shame, again, it tends to leave us feeling small and frozen and stuck. And rage has the ability to move us and activate us. And although rage is a disorganized experience and is often disproportionate to the primary emotion underneath it, and kind of like the boiling point, as I said earlier, it is sometimes it's important for you in the moment. And I think with the ability to have a healthy repair with the person that has to experiencing, if someone else experiences, of course, with the healthy repair, and that there's this quality of moms describing that they're shouting and they don't even recognize their own voice, which leads us into the fight or flight of sort of being disconnected or discombobulated during that rage experience. And I'll just go ahead and describe the relationship between rage and fight or flight, as your question was hinting in that direction. And obviously rage maps along the sympathetic nervous system fight response,
Mm-hmm.
and it's often strong enough to override uh, any other regulation that you might cognitively or rationally have. And it overrides that planning and reasoning part of the brain. And so that's why people literally explain seeing red or feeling like they were fully out of control.
Dissociated almost, yeah.
Yes, dissociated almost. And that this, as some of us, like myself, when we're in the postpartum period, when we're in a situation with our toddlers, when we're in a situation with our teens, where the threat activation system is feeling very sensitive and we're feeling short fused, that then mom rage happens.
Well, let me tell you what happens.
Yeah. And again, to normalize this, because
No.
every human has anger, and that's actually an important component of how we take care of ourselves at times, depending on how we can manage it. So with that normalization, well, we find it very important to talk about it today.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of things to say. We're gonna keep going a little bit though, but I have a lot of experience. Like this is real. I think that one of the things I think is going to be helpful for people is to understand, like, why does rage usually happen? Because I think it can kind of feel like it's coming from nowhere, but it's
and I think sometimes it really, particularly if we're not comfortable with it and we're always trying to sort of push it down, it can feel like it's coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's the end point to this buildup of repeated stress and unmet needs, and not having our emotions met, and not being allowed to express ourselves. And it's usually when a mama is past her capacity to regulate herself, to cover it up, to manage, and she can no longer ignore it or swallow it, and then kaboom, which is exactly what happened to me that morning in Alaska, that I write about in the Substack post from today.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm coming into a deeper relationship with is the fact that it is not, in fact, coming out of nowhere, although it feels out of nowhere in the moment, because it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and suddenly you go from like 0 to 100, kind of like your teenager or your toddler, they'll go 0 to 100 as well. And it is
exactly,
it's like in the moment you can't even stop it. Like you can't stop it happening, and then it happens, and then you're like, what just happened? And I think one of the things that I'm recognizing is that it is the internal. There's a lot of things, and I think that's important for us to have that conversation about, of things that are internal. It's like you said, it's the buildup, it's the unmet need, it's the suppression of the emotion, not being able to feel like you can express your emotion as a mom, feeling like you got to keep it all together. And then I think what's also interplays with that, and I really want you to talk about it because you're so good at talking about this, and actually you're the person that has identified this as a thing happening in my life without me being aware of it, is there are external stressors that are put on to us as mothers. And I really want you to talk about what are those sort of external stressors? Like, what do you think are they actually, what are the underlying factors that happen to drive mom rage?
Well, we often at Women's Well talk about the convergence, which it in itself, the hormonal changes certainly cannot be ignored. In early perimenopause, the hormones start to just become chaotic and fluctuate, and that swings us around each month. And so that's a big piece, is the hormonal fluctuation. And then as they decline and we get into later perimenopause, the sheer lack of them then leads to a whole nother type of vulnerability that can make our fuses very short and have us explode into rage and not be able to have as much capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hormonal piece. And then I think the the cyclical nature of our hormones, so that at certain times of the month that can feel more severe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece is what the culture is serving up for moms to what is deemed an acceptable or successful or good mother. And that, as we talked about last week,
Mm-hmm.
is called intensive mothering.
Mm-hmm.
And this term has sort of been created and brought forth as normal in our culture. And it's really a setup for moms to feel like we've failed and to feel quite vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
to have to uh, sort of suck it up and swallow things and feel beyond capacity, which lead to
Yeah.
mom rage.
And I also think too that we happen to come from a generation ourselves of like, we're gonna just suck it up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that we don't actually like recognize how to name things when we need help or to say how we need help. And I think that's important. And I think intensive mothering has a lot of pieces to it. We've talked about this a little bit, and I think we're going to go through a little bit here.
Well, I'll just say on that note of Gen X and older millennial moms, we certainly, I was a latchkey kid. I learned how to be very self-sufficient, self-reliant. I wasn't necessarily, if I had an emotional issue or an emotional problem, the counseling from my parents was more just deal with it, suck it up,
buttercup.
And those had really, positive things in that. I'm a very self-reliant, and actually it's interesting because that is different than intensive mothering, as we'll learn about today and next week.
Mm-hmm.
So it has really amazing benefits to have been parented that way.
Yeah.
But I think it led to when we were told that we needed to be practicing intensive mothering to be good parents, to be good moms,
Mm-hmm.
it was a setup for a perfect storm. To have the culture saying, moms should be superhuman, and have Gen X and older millennials say, hey, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I can have a full-time career and I'm fine.
And
so it's a setup for disaster, really, as we spoke about last week, and how our mental health, if you look at statistically and across the globe, is worse than ever for moms. So
it's horrific. It's unacceptable. Honestly, it's unacceptable. And I also think the other piece of that too is, in general, we've grown much more isolated as a culture. We don't, our single family units, or we're single parent units, right? Like there is such an individualization or an isolation that's like naturally happening culturally, at least in the Western world, right? In the United States, I think in a lot of, developed countries, there's more isolation than not. And that added layer just compounds into this stack of things that really create an interesting arrival at matrescence and perimenopause for people, right? And so I think one of the things, because for you and I, Amy, Dr. Amy, we've talked about this, like intensive mothering is I didn't even know it was I didn't even know I was in the middle being influenced by it. I didn't really even know. And then once you kind of understand it, you kind of start to realize like, oh, this is the layer that's been on top. So before we talk individually about each sort of like through each part of intensive mothering, like, can you just give a little bit of background for people so they have a better understanding of where did it actually start, what kind of it is, and it's statistically, like, what does this all look like?
Yes, and I will just first say that intensive mothering is this cultural norm that mothering is child centered, it's expert led by us, reading books telling us how to do it. It's financially very expensive. It's extremely labor intensive. Moms are spending more time momming than ever before. And I'm having a brain moment. The fifth is sorry.
What? Child center, financial.
No,
Did you say
said it.
financial? Oh, listen, this is it. This is what really happens to us mothers in these later ages.
Oh, sorry.
You forget.
Emotionally absorbing, which I
Emotionally
often think of as labor intensive, but
Yeah.
it's and emotional absorbing. So today we're going to walk through child centered and expert led, and next week we'll do labor intensive, emotionally absorbing, and financially ridiculous.
Genuinely, for real.
Genuine.
Oh,
So yeah, so that's intensive mothering. And when I read Lucy Jones' beautiful book called Matrescence, which
love it.
just keyed me into even what that meant because I didn't know. Six
Never
months
heard
ago,
it.
I didn't know. It's not in our dictionary, even though it's one of the most important transitions of a woman's life. She really goes into this cultural norm of mothering, what's happened. And I will just say that this ideology has historically tightened its grip on moms at exactly the moments when women were gaining independence and power elsewhere. And so that's really the predictable pattern that we see
Mm-hmm.
in our culture. And I will give some examples. Um, the idea that a child was innocent and fragile has actually began in the 17th and 18th centuries. And it's funny to think that before that it wasn't thought of as such, but we're so far, into that I think that would be a topic for another time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then in World War II, as women worked
Mm-hmm.
wartime jobs, but then the war ended and they were all supposed to go back home, the policy, national policy, and national media framed going back home as natural rather than political.
Mm-hmm.
And these women had found that natural can be working and momming, not just momming in the home. So that was a disconnect. And then child centeredness was really intensified even more in the 1950s and 60s. And that's really when this idea that the attachment theory started to become popular from a person named Bowlby, which I will talk about more. But to then go into the 1980s, where there became a modern version of that attachment theory and the intensive mothering.
Mm-hmm.
And so intensive mothering became even stronger in the 1980s. And this was simultaneously when women were getting more college degrees. Um, women had women actually were earning more bachelor's degrees than men for the first time ever. And then Sharon Hayes, a psychologist and theorist, she coined the term intensive mothering and really saw it as the culture trying to tighten its grip on the rights of women And um, and since that time, I think there's been this debate amongst women between how to mother, um, and what's best: mothering in the home, mothering at and being a career woman, and that has sort of pitted women against each other. And I just strongly feel like that whatever you choose is it's your choice, and that we
Mhm.
should all support each other.
Mhm.
And so, I don't have much interest in that, those arguments about how to mother. I just want to bring all moms, support all moms again to return to who they truly are in their authentic and powerful way. Um,
Well, because if you are that, then it only benefits your children. If you, as the mother,
yeah,
are
yeah,
supported and aligned with your truest self, that your children and the world benefit greatly
yeah, yeah,
from that. Yeah.
yes,
I that it is interesting when you break it down the way that you have, that how it is, like how that trend has happened. It would be it it is interesting. It's no surprise. I think um, I think, like you said, we're going to talk specifically about a couple of these demands of intensive mothering. And the first one you've talked about a little bit, but this child centered.
and I
So,
am in no way a child psychologist or a mom psychologist.
sociologists and anthropologists, none of that. We
Right.
get
I'm not a historian, but just sort of from what I have learned over this last year about this and trying to raise awareness for us moms in midlife. Um, so
well, and I
I
think that there's just a lot. There has been in a drive toward a more intensive mothering. Like if you just naturally look at the trajectory, I will tell you, even 20 years ago when I was raising my oldest, like there has been a shift and change
there
culturally.
certainly has, and
Hmm.
um, we can go. We will in this next bit. We'll go through it, including, um, Dr. Spock in the 1940s, the Sears later. I don't know if they were I think 70s and 80s, but we'll go through that into the next, even into gentle parenting. So we can now dive into that,
Yeah.
and to echo you, there has been a huge trend in this intensive mothering.
Yeah. So I think what we can do is really just talk about what does child centered mean? Where did it come from? Give us a little a background of that. I think we're all going to be able to relate because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. I know. This is basically your child's needs come before your own, always and without exception.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced this myself in my life. In that um, once I even was pregnant, it just became about, am I going to
Yeah.
do everything, get everything to make sure that it's perfect for my son. And
Mm-hmm.
that continued when he came into the world. And um, I think, like I said, uh, this trend intensified in the 1940s with Dr. Spock. And it's very interesting to read about how um, where he was telling parents to no longer stay emotionally distant, which had been the trend before that.
Mm-hmm.
And he told the post war baby boomers to trust their parenting instincts, to trust their mothering instincts, to see the
Mm-hmm.
world through the child's eyes. But he clearly said, but do it in my way. Trust me as the expert.
Mm-hmm.
So Spock really created also the first, um, he really increased this idea of intensive mothering, that we need to trust the expert more than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But sticking with the child centered element of intensive mothering, Dr. Spock, his book sold more than 50 million copies in
Mm-hmm.
the post war baby boom generation. And then in the 1980s, there was a pediatrician named William Sears, and he and his wife Martha. And this is the book that I used in 2011. It
Mm-hmm.
was still very popular, and it sold millions of copies as well. And it was around physical closeness, breastfeeding, co-sleeping, baby wearing. And I
All great
really
things.
love, right, which have great, there are beyond good things from this,
Mhm.
but it led to, once again, mom feeling like what the child needed, and what the child wanted was more important than taking care of herself,
Mhm.
to the detriment of not only herself but that mother-child relationship and the family.
Yeah.
Um, and in 2012, Time Magazine had an article called "Are You Mom Enough?" And it brought attachment parenting into an open public fight. And the sociologist later described it as making the intensive mothering concept that Hayes brought finally tangible and specific and visible as a set of practices for the first time.
Mhm.
And then the most recent wave of this is called gentle parenting. And that specifically during the pandemic,
Mhm.
parents lost any support that they had. It was just them and their child, and they really turned to online parenting communities. And this was asking mom to not only make sure the child's needs are above hers, but that she is at every moment to be supporting the child, to be emotionally regulating themselves, and taking care of every other need before hers.
Mhm.
And if she didn't do this, she was a bad mom.
Mhm.
And this plays out I will give some examples to
Mhm.
illustrate it because it might be confusing. That, for example, a mom that has littles, so 3-year old, 5-year old, she is negotiating every meltdown. She is spending 20, 30 minutes trying to negotiate the meltdown with her child.
Mhm.
And she is negotiating each decision for her toddler, giving her toddler many decisions and negotiating it. And this will override her own plan, her own her own decision, and a family's plan for the whole day based on what the toddler is telling her. And I am not judging, because I did this with my toddler when Elijah was a toddler. He's now 15. I did this.
I
And I felt so frustrated by it and so overwhelmed by it. But I did it because unbeknownst to me, I was practicing child centered, intensive mothering.
Mhm.
Do you have any experience
Yeah,
with?
I mean, I think that I
Eric has a 3-year old and a 5-year old.
yeah, it's interesting because when my 26-year-old, I like had no tolerance. I was like, no, I don't think so. Not happening. Get out of here. I will say I do tend to do that with my toddlers now. I don't have a lot of bandwidth for negotiation with a toddler, but it's interesting to see how I have changed in
Mm-hmm.
20 years without recognizing the cultural impact that's had on me. And
Yeah,
there
yeah,
is this, like, I'm recognizing, like, oh, this gentle parenting concept, this is like landing in my life, happening in real time. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I think I actually now negotiate more than I did 20 years ago because
yeah,
I'm subconsciously exposed to it. And it does sometimes in my head, I'm like, why am I like, why am I even like, what are we doing? Like, why am I giving them a choice about what they're going to be able to watch? Like, they're 3. I should like drive the decision
or
here.
what they should eat, or what.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I agree. I was lucky that I had a preschool teacher that described to me that it was helpful for them to just to not have to make those decisions for themselves, which, so it helped me to do it less, but I still did it all the time.
Mhm.
And the concern that Elijah would feel like he wasn't getting his emotions and his needs met how he needed it. It was, intentions are good around it, but it leads to a lot of effort and time that is not necessarily good for your child or your family. And it also leads to moms spending more time in these energies of child care. And child-centered intensive mothering actually has led to, I believe, 10 hours a week of more time spent in childcare than in the 1960s that we do now. So it literally is so much more time consuming for moms.
Yep.
And I love this metaphor in it's a company where the customer is always right, is under 4 feet tall, and can't read the return policy.
My husband always is like, it's like your drunk friend in college.
And we would say, don't negotiate with terrorists. So when he was 3, 4, 5, that we kind of tried to hold the line by that little funny metaphor. So that's child-centered.
Yeah.
Deal with child-centered.
I think, let's just do just a couple more here, and then maybe we should hold on expert guided, and maybe we'll talk about expert guided at our next.
Yeah, let's do it next time, and really just dive in right now into what is happening to a woman when she is doing child-centered care in intensive mothering, because it has psychological and spiritual implications when she's doing that. And before I do that, I would just describe that as a mom with a teenager, I'm still doing it.
I literally was going to say, I feel like you're still doing the same thing.
We are all still doing it.
Negotiate.
So I rearrange my schedule around what he wants to do. Yeah. If he wants me to drive him to the game store to play Magic, I drop everything. I'm doing it. I'm still checking in with him all the time about homework. And here's a perfect example. My summer is all about what are his personal, life dreams. What does he, we went fishing at his bucket list, with Tahoe with his friends to eat foil. And it's not that I love giving that to my son. And I had fun as well. Yeah. I had a really sweet time. We were seeing friends or family, but the priority in the summer schedule was certainly centered on what my teen wanted.
Yeah, rather than like a family centered or
yes.
Whatever the definition of family is for your family, doesn't.
And we get in trouble quite a bit with that, in that John, my husband, and I could become tired, frustrated, and even angry because we've once again done that. I think it's more common than is talked about, actually, in this light of parents. Moms don't even realize that it's
happening,
crept in as the norm. But certainly.
And I think you and I are not saying that anything is right or wrong. It's just an acknowledgement of like what is happening and what are the layers of things that can come from these kind of insidious sort of things that seep in, especially because I would say, I think in the last 20 years, the advent of social media has really changed people's ability to be witness to other people or other things, or the perception of other things happening. And like, I didn't have that with my 26-year-old. What do you mean? I didn't see anybody else. Just,
Yeah, no, it's really cool that you have the lived experience of
it's interesting,
a child 20 years ago and a child today to see, because intensive mothering was actually, promoted when your son was born.
Oh, for sure.
You were at a different age, but it was. Yeah. But it's much more today.
Yeah. And it's just insidious, I think.
It really is.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about like what can happen when you are inside of this, from psychological in spiritual perspective, because
Mm-hmm.
it's happening on an unconscious level a lot, and that can drive your rage response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
it
know?
can, because as you're doing this psychologically, from a family systems theory, the boundary between yourself and your child collapses.
Yeah.
So you stop registering your own separate needs, and then you can't take care of yourself, and you feel overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
and you are not doing self-care. So you're going to get to that place of overwhelm and vulnerability, and so there's probably going to be a lot of mom rage, actually.
Well, and when you're doing that in the middle of perimenopause, when you have
Mm,
like the
yeah, forget about it.
pull out, the pulling of the perimenopause pulls you out to your individual self, yet you're stuck in this like intense mothering space, like the push pull.
Hmm.
It's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot. And when you're in the postpartum phase, it's this Sears created this popular idea that you should be wearing that baby at all times, and he actually came to that theory by meeting a couple of African women when he was at a conference. He did not parent that way himself, but he and his wife then had this idea, Sears, that is what would make an emotionally healthy connection between you and your child. And I did this with Elijah, and I feel that we do have a healthy emotional connection. But at the same time, it didn't allow for me to take care of my own needs, and my own emotions. So um, I think many of us who have teenagers, we started with the Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Sears book and wrapping our child to our bodies, again with a lot of good outcomes, but with a psychological um, outcome now that we are not able to take care of ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't even know the separation between ourselves and our children, even when our children are teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're going? I didn't know if you're going.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I think that, so psychologically, it can be really, really difficult, really devastating, and lead to a lot of mom rage.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think, if there's, and we talk about this, maybe we'll talk about it next time, but like the idea of the sacred hoop, being able to hold your own hoop, in that the thing that means what's true for you and authentic for you and safe for you. If you are able to stay in your own hoop, then you can include your child in that. But when you're in this place and things collapse, it's really hard to hold that space um, for both of you.
Well, not only that, Erica, but so our sacred hoop is our way of being, where we are in our own truth. So we are
Correct.
living our authentic self.
Mhm.
With child-centered intensive mothering, the hoop now only holds the child. You're not even in the hoop.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
So
You're
there's
not
not,
even part of it. You
you're
just
not
like,
even part of
you're
the
holding the
hoop,
hula hoop on the outside.
which is why you get to, if you've been doing this throughout their childhood, you get to perimenopause, which asks you to understand yourself more and come back to yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
haven't asked yourself, what do I want? What do I need? Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Since your child was born, you've just been focusing on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's really difficult. That's a
It
difficult
is.
place.
It is. It is a really. It is why rage will show.
Yeah, and why then you don't understand, what is this perimenopause all about? It just
Mm-hmm.
seems like I feel horrible. I don't feel like myself,
Mm-hmm.
but you've forgotten who you really are. And what an invitation then to start to understand that. And that's what our retreats and our groups are all
I
about.
know. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Is there anything that we can give our mamas, like, as an idea of, like, what are a couple things that, like, if this resonates with you and you're like, maybe I need to, like, take a peek at this, and, like, are there things that we could do now that we could put into action that might be helpful to sort of create a little bit less child-centered and more holding center for yourself and child,
Yeah, like a first step. I
Yeah.
know, because
Easy
if
things.
you hear this and you're like, well, gosh, how am I supposed to change this? This seems like really overwhelming, and I'm so far down the rabbit hole. How do I get back out? And I would just say, for me, with my teenage son, to remind myself that it's very good for him to solve his own problems.
Yeah.
Give him a small problem to solve himself. So letting him decide when he's going to do his homework every day. And if he's doing it, then he's doing it, but remind yourself that's his problem to solve. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, and I'll say for me, I think
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of the toddler, the 3-year-olds. Listen, I'm just gonna say it. Don't love 3. 3 is a hard age for me.
I know.
It's a hard age.
know.
I'm so into 4 and 5. I do enjoy it. 3 is a little. We push my boundary, push my button, and my 3-year-old is doing it now, and he's really, like, now we're 3.5, and I find from 3.5 to about 4, like, we really grinding in. So I think one of the things that we do in our household is we really do hold a boundary. Like, you can have your feelings and you can have your tantrum. I'm cool with that. I am okay with you expressing your disappointment, the frustration that you have. And we're not going to have a negotiation about this. I will negotiate on some things. I will prioritize negotiation when I think it's, like, not it, we don't need to worry about it. But, like, are we negotiating taking a bath or a shower? No. You got to take one. I'm sorry, picking one. And by the time we're in, we're happy. We're fine. It's just that resilience up front. So,
even if you just, if you're a mom and you have a toddler and you're like, oh my God, that sounds so hard to just say no and let them have their tantrum. Just start with one thing that you're going to say no to and just allow them to have, just start with the bath. And and see how it goes. I think these are baby steps.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming.
And then I guess I would like to share an idea. If you have a baby, you could allow your baby to self-soothe for 5 minutes. They're not.
That makes me anxious.
They're okay. Before you go to step in, I know it's hard because you hate to hear them fussing, but mama, that they're really okay. And so just, letting them have self-soothe for 5 minutes, one time a day, is a good first step to this.
This is good. This is funny. I'm not realizing how much I'm attached a little bit to some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then if you have a grade schooler, and I am so guilty of not doing this, but sometimes being able to, let them be bored.
Let them be bored.
Let it be
it's
bored.
Okay.
And even if it's just for 10 minutes.
They'll be more creative. They'll actually become creative in the boredom.
They will.
I do that. I actually do that now with my toddlers.
Yeah,
I actually force them.
It's important. It's so good for them. But now that we have ability to give them some screen so easily at all turns, but let them be bored is a good start. Yes. All right. Well, good luck, mamas. Those are some tips.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're doing a great
job.
We're
all in this together. So I think that's a wrap, a good place to stop today. And we can go into the other 4 elements in the future. And thanks, Erica, for being here today.
Thank you for being. Thanks for answering all that and being on the hot seat.
Yeah, sure. And we have a Sisterhood Circle starting soon. I wanted to let everyone know we're changing the format from a talk to a circle where we're going to show up. We have some questions if needed to get the juices flowing, and the invitation to allow each woman to share, to listen, to be together, because the circle is the medicine. So
some medicine.
We're going to be transitioning to that this fall.
Stay posted about all these things,
days and times.
Yeah. And if we have our website's womenswell.com or .co.com, .co. Co. And we have some fun things if you want to check them out at womenswell.co/links. There's some free guides around there. Also, just drop us any messages, any DMs if you want us to talk about anything more. You have questions, comments.
Yeah, and share it with a friend. Share it with a friend
if
if it'll
it
help.
resonates.
It'll help
We're
her.
so excited to be building this community with you. Thank you, Dr. Amy.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.